I feel like we live in a world where we are constantly being asked to market ourselves, to come up with ways to make more money, where time is money, and we constantly have to be selling and selling and selling. When we don't believe in that world, or we feel like we don't want to participate in it, where we want to build a world or a community that is different, perhaps a community based on care, how do we survive in that world? How do we thrive in that world? And how do we know when it's okay to charge for what we're doing so that we can pay rent and buy groceries? This is the question that our guest, Ray, brings to us today. And I think it is a question that we need to talk about. I'm Mauricio Bruce, and this is The Real Question. Hi, Ray.
Hi, Mauricio.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's very exciting to have you here. I cannot wait to see where our conversation takes us. Before that, as you might have heard, we're starting the podcast with a question that I'm asking all my guests. If you could tell me anything about yourself, what would you tell me?
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here, and I've enjoyed listening to this question. I am someone who's really great to have around in an emergency.
Tell me more.
I generally am prepared on some basics like Benadryl, Band-Aids, snacks, water. I also have some skills. I'm not EMT level trained, but I do have some hard skills. And I'm also, in addition to that, just willing to step in. I'm a very willing bystander to step in and help engage if I can.
Okay. You'll send me your phone number so I can add you to my emergency contacts.
I'm really local emergency services person. But yes, if I'm around, I will let you know.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm really curious. What's your question? Where are we going today? What are we talking about?
Yeah, the question I reached out with is, should I charge for spiritual leadership? For offering spiritual leadership.
Okay. So can you define spiritual leadership for me?
Some of the things that I have offered or like to offer is creating community rituals, crafting and practicing prayer, providing prompts to wrestle with life and how to live life well, and celebrating and grieving significant life transitions. And there is a formalized version of this, and I am graduating from seminary with my MDiv this spring. But there's also, I think, a lot of the ways that just show up for each other. So there's some aspect of this that I want to talk about that is just emotional labor and offering care to people.
Yeah. Spiritual leadership seems like such a formal term. Is this what, when you're talking to someone, do you offer this? Can I offer you some spiritual leadership? Or how do you talk about it yourself?
Oh, that's such a great question, because I think I'm still framing it. I mean, in certain contexts, it would say a kind of ministry or a kind of pastoral conversation.
Okay.
I think if it's just kind of out in the world, to definitely use more words like care.
Okay. And then the question of should I charge? Can you explain that question for me a little bit? What's the conflict for you about charging versus not charging? What is under there?
Oh, yeah. There are many things. And actually, I'm going to pause and say that a lot of the heart of this question for me is at the intersection between living with chronic illness, having what I call a near death experience, and a physical health crisis in my early 20s, and then being socialized as a girl and a woman. And so this kind of at the intersection of those two things informs a lot of the way that I've been thinking about this and the work I've done and why this is a question for me right now. So this kind of spiritual work that we were just describing, care work, I absolutely believe is worthy of compensation and needs to be compensated for so people can offer that, since that is the way that our world works and having resources, especially financial resources. At the same time, I have a lot of grief around a lot of care becoming individualized. I am someone who goes to therapy and have spiritual directors and talk to people. It's like one-on-one and really value those services. And also have a lot of people in my life who are practitioners that offer care. And I feel this sense of loss of community healing and care, and more that there is primarily access to this care that's a one-on-one relationship that you also need to compensate the practitioner for, which again, I want the practitioners to be compensated. But I know from my own experience when I was really sick, going back to my home UU church and being able to be part of this community and also have people who would check in with me and who I could talk to about some of the things I was wrestling with, and not having to turn around and fill out insurance information or pay a bill immediately, was really an essential part of healing from that experience. Not only because I couldn't work at the time and was financially insecure, but also because of needing that kind of depth of care of like, oh, I get to have this conversation because I'm part of this community.
That's really beautiful, Ray. As I'm listening to you, I'm trying to interpret and I'm trying to sort of put it into my own words. There's something there that you're talking about community and being held by a community. And then you're comparing it, or you're putting it in a conversation with this individual care, right? Like being held by a community versus sitting one-on-one with someone.
Yes.
And I just want to make clear, and I just want to make sure, your question, should I charge for spiritual leadership, is talking about one-on-one, not about community, or is it both?
It's undecided, but I'm not currently seeking ordination. And so I'm not currently planning on being connected to a congregation offering ministry. So the reason why this question is coming up for me is I don't really want to be only an individual practitioner, but I don't know exactly what that looks like outside of a typical church context or like a nonprofit organization, direct service work. And even if it is group gatherings, which I am currently offering, like I do offer ritual gatherings with a co-collaborator. We have like a small group of people and we meet weekly at certain times. It's still, if and when I ask for compensation for that, it's still from those individuals, right? Where when you have a larger organization or denomination or something, there are resources that can get pooled in from elsewhere. It's not the responsibility of just a small group of people.
So you said you're not looking to get ordained. And so you want to sort of offer spiritual leadership and be a community builder, but not within a specific denomination or church. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm wondering, is there a question here about identity? When you're out in the world, you're saying, I'm not going to be any kind of ordained person, right? So I'm not going to call myself a Catholic priest or an Anglican priest or whatever they call themselves. What would you call yourself?
Okay, I think I understand your question because I don't know. I mean, it still is minister. That's like I was taught both that there's a small m minister and there's a large m minister. And so it'd be a small m minister.
Can you explain the difference for me?
I mean, really the title, the public recognition of having been ordained, or the way that we often talk in churches of like, what is every person's ministry that they do out in the world? Could be vocation. It could be just your kind of work that you get to bless the world with.
Mm-hmm. But within that definition, is everyone a small m minister?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or they could, yeah, everyone is welcome to take that on.
Okay, so I want to find out if all of us are small m ministers, what is Ray?
Yeah. I do think this is really part of the question, because I think the small m ministry is also often volunteer, right? Most of members at a congregation give some of their time for free, and that's what helps the community run and exist. And I really value that, right? Just as I also value people being compensated for their work, of also that I want to give care freely. I want to offer my skills and gifts to the world freely. And so I think that is part of the question of like, there is a freedom, but also I feel like a gift to being a volunteer doing ministry.
Are you a volunteer, Ray?
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm. But there's a sense as we talk that that's not what you're aspiring to, right? There are bigger aspirations within Ray to be and offer spiritual leadership, as you first said it, that goes beyond a volunteer.
Yes.
Like when you think of yourself within that role, not within the volunteer role that all of us small m ministers can do, but within the role that Ray is going to take in the world, where I feel care is so important to Ray. Is that right?
Yes.
What does that feel like when you connect to that desire to give and offer care to the world? What does that feel like in your body?
Grief, heartbreak, tenderness, relief.
Thank you. Yeah. Grief, heartbreak, tenderness, relief. I think it's really interesting, Ray, that you started this show telling me how great you are in an emergency. And in a way, I can't help connecting that to this that lives inside of you that is just really willing to go out there and hold others during their emotional, spiritual, and even physical emergencies. This tenderness, this grief, this heartbreak for the world that you carry inside you. And that is really wondering, can I charge for this? Or do I just have to give it to the world for free?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, does this feel for you like a spiritual vocation, like something that was sent to you from beyond?
Yes, I would describe it as more though an impulse that has then been honed through relationship with people, with ancestors, with spirit, with God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The way that you described it, I really felt it, right? It feels like a gift, and I don't want to charge for a gift, but I also need to make money.
Yes, I agree. And you're sitting sort of in this struggle between, I have this gift that allows me to connect to the world with such passion and tenderness, and it's intense. So I want to just take you back. Now that we know the feeling and you've put it in your body, can you see how it's more than a lowercase minister?
Yes. And I do think about it that way. But so I think it's true. I haven't known what to, if it's not ordained ministry and it's not this other ministry, I haven't known what the other thing is.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that. And I don't think we have to sort of box it in, but I want you to see that it's that it's something else. It's not just a volunteer. It's not the capital M minister, but it's something that you are still sort of understanding, refining, honing, as you said. And it is something that sometimes feels bigger than you. You talked about having these small groups that you gather with weekly. Can you tell me when that group is gathering, what do you call those groups?
Right now, there's a group of us trying out being in liturgical season together. So we did an Advent series together, and now we're just starting a Lent series together. And that's what we are calling ourselves, is this we're a group or a small group in a Lenten gathering series.
Okay. Are you the leader? What do you call yourself in that group?
Yeah. Creator, facilitator, collaborator.
Do you charge for that group?
So, in part because I'm asking this question and having this conversation, we just tried out asking for like a sliding scale from 0 to an amount for this next Lenten series, but we didn't for Advent.
Mm-hmm. And how did that feel? There's a sliding scale. You can pay from 0 to 50. How did it feel to ask for money?
Vulnerable.
Yeah. Tell me more.
It feels like it changes the relationship.
Because?
It feels like the stakes are different. And that there is a material accountability in addition to relational accountability.
And it felt like that even though it was a volunteer sliding scale. You weren't saying you have to pay 20 to be here.
Those were my initial feelings about even just talking about inviting compensation. The reason why I could do it is because it's a sliding scale donation of the heart. You are still welcome regardless. So I think that's kind of the question of like, I can do that. I feel comfortable enough asking for folks to contribute something that they want to. But the thinking about, would I want to bring this work into a capacity where I would like rely on the income from it, is what feels scary. Especially because of my history with chronic health issues. I have this fear of depletion. I have a fear of depletion. And in particularly around financial insecurity. Like when I have offered workshops or a series and gotten compensated for it, it feels like a one-off thing, like extra cash, but it has never been, outside of a church job, has never been like income that is like, that's what I'm relying on to pay rent and to get groceries. And I have a real fear of associating my ability to provide emotional care as my income, like what I'm relying on financially.
Mm-hmm.
As a volunteer, I can very easily say, I will give that, I will not give that. And when I am being paid, it is much harder for me to honor my own limitations. And it's curious because I actually feel I'm quite practiced at saying no. But when it taps into an insecurity of my financial resources, can become very difficult for me to say, I actually can't do that, but I should still be paid for my general work.
So if I get paid, I can no longer say no as much as when I'm a volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that comes a little bit from working at church. So I told this beautiful story about receiving care from church, which is really real and has shaped me.
Yeah.
I also worked at a church for many years and was not always paid well and worked a lot worked really hard. And I had to leave that job because of sickness. It was really difficult to say, I can't do this because I need to take care of myself. I mean, it was sad. It was the hardest thing I've had to do, leaving that job so far in my life, both because of my attachment to that community and my love for the work that I did, and that I was having health complications that felt really beyond my control. There are many reasons that it was hard, but it was also this, I'm being paid to be able to offer a certain kind of presence and care for someone else. But I'm currently now in a place where I need to receive. And so because I need to receive care, that means I won't have my income anymore. That's, I think, part of the correlation some of that is real, and the story that has really taken root in my head.
So having sort of found that story that you just mentioned, can you put it in terms of our question? Can you retell that story in terms of our question?
If I rely again on my capacity to offer care and a quality of presence to other people, but know that I also have seasons in my life where that's really depleting and costly to my health, and that I actually need to receive and not be the one giving that, I don't know what happens to my income in those periods of time. And so one of the, just practical questions like, okay, do I get paid to do different kind of work and then fit this work into whatever I have left, which I don't love thinking about it that way. But I feel an insecurity, a vulnerability about attaching my ability to offer emotional labor, quality of presence, ritual containers with my income.
Thank you for that. If I go back to the question, should I charge for my spiritual leadership, which I'm going to change, should I charge for my care? Right now, where are you standing with it after the conversation we've had so far?
I feel a lot of sadness and some frustration. This sense of calling, this sense of gift that I want to give to the world, and then feeling like it's been really challenging to figure out how to give that and support myself.
Yeah.
I want to believe that I should be given resources to meet my basic needs, whether I can or cannot work.
Yeah.
And this world, especially as it is continuing in this nation, really at an escalated pace, there is an erosion of social services.
Yeah.
And I know that I am in need of social services and a web of support. And I also want to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to find and be part of a kind of reciprocity that is different than these transactional relationships that I described at the beginning.
Yeah.
Where I can give and also receive, and there isn't this, well, you won't get what you need if you can't give right now.
Yep. And that connects me back to the community in your church that you talked about at the beginning, because it seems like what you would like to create, or what you're being called to create, if I can use that, is sort of a community of care.
Yes.
When you decide to rest and the others are caring, they can care for you, and then you can care back, and everybody sort of is getting what everybody needs.
Yes. That's the dream.
Yeah, that's sort of the vision. But for that vision to work, the people in that community have to be paid in something.
Mm-hmm.
So in my line of work as a therapist, there are people who can pay me who then support those people who can't or shouldn't pay me. And I think that's important to be able to hold within you too. Did that make sense?
Yes.
But I think it's important regardless for you to always get recognized for what you're giving. Not only from the outside, but also from within.
Thank you.
I have this deep sense, Ray, as I speak to you and as we explore this topic, that what you're talking about and what we're talking about right now is going to become more and more and more important. There's a need to remember that we care for each other. Like, I feel like it's a really important thing for us to talk about and for us to remember.
I appreciate getting to talk about it. I felt lonely in the question, even as I recognize that I don't think it's unique to me, especially, as you said, in this political time. I think my experience of having financial insecurity feels really lonely. I think it's intended to feel lonely.
Yeah. Thank you, Ray. Thank you so much for coming on our show, for the work you do in the world.
Thank you, Mauricio. It was really wonderful to laugh and cry and chat with you.
I look forward to the things you're going to create. I think follow that calling, because I think it'll lead you in a wonderful direction. This has been The Real Question. Our show is funded through our Patreon at patreon.com/realquestionpod. And if you're a regular listener, I want you to come see us in Patreon. We would love your support. 2 weeks ago, I had a 1-hour Zoom meeting with our Patreons where we discussed some of the themes of the episodes of the last month. We talked about how we felt, what it brought up in our own lives. It was a really fun, really interesting conversation, and I would love you to be a part of it. Another way you can support this show is by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. I've been reading all the reviews, and I am so appreciative. Please leave me your reviews. Tell me how we're doing. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Real Question Pod. And we are always looking for more guests. So go to our website, realquestionpod.com, to submit your question, and maybe we'll be having a conversation right here on the show. We love to shout out our BFF tier patrons, Renee Underhill, Becky Boo, Jenny Cruz, and Amanda Schramm. We are Not Sorry Production. Our executive producer is Vanessa Zoltan. We are edited and produced by Ariana Nettleman. Music is by Nick Bowl, and we are distributed by Acast. And support for this show comes from the Fetzer Institute. Thank you, Ray, for joining us today. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for this question and for reminding us of our own value and our own worth. And thanks as always to our wonderful team, Julia Argy, Nikki Zoltan, AJ Yaramas, Anissa Ahmed, Danny Langley, Courtney Brown, Casper Turkile, and Stephanie Paulsell. This has been an episode of The Real Question. Join me next week for more conversations, more guests, and a new question. See you then.